one of the objects that we can settle on is our emotions, is our feelings. And to be able to do that, it's helpful to have some sort of label, first of all. But very often when you do this exercise with younger people that I'm used to as a teacher, they might be okay to put their pebble somewhere and say, okay, this is roughly what I'm feeling like now, this is about the right word. But then they find it really difficult to describe where that actually came from, why they're feeling like that. And that's one of those things that is good for us to investigate, good for us to ask ourselves, where do those feelings come from? And the more kind of refined our understanding of these things becomes, is that there are so many different things that are contributing to this. So it can be the experiences we had, it can be the thoughts that are running through our minds, but it can also be something physical. So, sometimes when you're feeling a bit grumpy, you realize that it has to do with something which is happening in the body. That maybe your belly is not so well at that time, or you're tired, or you're irritated because of that. So when you understand what the source of it is, then you can also understand how to address some things that are not so helpful. And also to understand that these things are all composed of so many different parts, and then they build this one kind of concept, this one kind of thought. And if we are not careful, we can just believe that one thought. We can just believe that one label without understanding that there is actually more behind that. That's one thing of not believing these things too much. And also with the feelings where I was saying, it can shift a lot. That is one of those things that we also have to realize, how quickly these things can shift and move. And sometimes we forget that. When an emotion becomes really strong, when a thought pattern becomes really strong, we can get so caught up in it that we don't realize that it is actually very fleeting. And I was just talking to someone about this recently, and the example that came up for me to describe it to them, how fleeting they are, was a childhood memory for me. So, something happens in the family, you do something wrong, your parent is not so happy with you, and they kind of get angry, and they start to, express that anger, and maybe even they raise their voice, and they are, firm with you. But then, for some reason, the phone rings. And that was so funny for me to see my mother in this kind of mode of like, I'm not happy with you. I can't remember what it was, but there is this one mother, and then this one mother picks up the phone and talks in a completely different voice, as if nothing has happened to the person who is on the other end. And I was so shocked. I was like, how can this mother, who is angry one moment, be so sweet and so listening and accommodative to whoever is on the other end of the phone? Where I realized how quickly these things can change. So we realize that whatever is feeding that emotion, whatever is feeding those thoughts, whatever is feeding the things which are going on in the body, is creating that. And when those causes and conditions are not there, then it shifts all by itself. So we don't believe in those things too much. And one other thing that came to me also this morning when I was kind of reflecting about this is one of the quotes of Ajahn Chah. One of the things that he used to teach his monastics, as far as I have been told, is to not follow your moods. Because the moods, they go this way and they go that way. And if you go with those moods too strongly, you will be swept back and forth with those moods in your life. And you're basically under their control. If you're not aware of what's happening, why these things are happening, and if you have a certain kind of distance from them as well. The other thing, when you have a look afterwards on those cards again, there is kind of like a color coding. And the color coding is going from blue, which could be described as low energy states, to green and yellow, which are more balanced mental states and emotions, and to high energy states. And so I just have a couple of words written down. I often work with slides, and I might be using this during our retreat that we're going to be doing at Jhana Grove together. So I'll just read out. So the blue energy is the energy of when we can be numb, we can feel stuck, we can feel paralyzed because there is so little energy in us. We can feel disconnected, we can feel not interested, we can feel flat. I think we can all kind of connect to these things, and we feel like that sometimes. But if we believe them, if we feed them, if we encourage them, so to speak, then we are kind of caught in that mind state, in that energy state. So in those kind of energy states, we try to lift ourselves up and to move from this kind of stuck energy to an energy which is still not too excited, but where we start to be calm, where we start to be settled, where we start to be peaceful, where we start to be still, but not stuck in that kind of, not frozen in that kind of energy. So we feel steady, we feel grounded, we feel maybe also reflective. So when we are still, then we're able to turn inwards and to understand things. Then our energies kind of come back to ourselves and are available to also go deeper and look inside of ourselves. Then when we go to the other spectrum, when we're starting to move into the more higher energy states, into the yellow things, then a certain openness happens, a certain curiosity, we are glad, we are excited. So when we are still and reflective, very often we are turned inwards and we are not maybe so aware of so much what is going on around us. But once we start to go into more connecting with other people, then we go into these kind of yellow states. If that energy goes a bit too high though, like it did go with me before, is then we can feel anxious, then we can start to feel tense or start to be feeling restless or even on edge. And when the energy becomes really strong, when we go into these red things, then we go into agitation, into feeling really wired, into feeling driven or addicted by certain things that pull us out. It's those kind of red states. And it can even go to the point of explosiveness, of being overwhelmed or of being really kind of high. And the one of the words there was like crazy or desperate as well. And now one thing that we have to understand is that this is actually almost like circular. Very often when we get into these very, very high states, the next thing that happens is exhaustion. And we're falling back into these low states. So that's what you will see there, that it is actually kind of a circular thing. So maybe you want to have a look at that later down the track. So our idea with, this is kind of more psychology maybe, or more kind of a bit worldly, but if we want to apply this to meditation and to steadying and having a still and peaceful mind, that is great, but we also want to make sure that there is enough energy to balance these two kind of things, so that we are relaxed, but that we are at the same time open, curious, that we are flexible as well. And that's kind of what we often teach together as well when we use the term relax and grow. That's what I often say as well. So it's really important to have this relaxation aspect, but then we also want to have the aspect of growth, of energy. But it has to be the right type of energy, the wholesome type of energy. And when these two things come together, then we have this kind of balanced state. So that's what I wanted you to maybe encourage you for the next couple of days. And that was also the idea for me of the pebble. because you are carrying it with yourself all the time. It's kind of like a reminder. You can use that, think of the pebble and know it's by my side. When I get up, the pebble is there. When I'm walking, when I'm doing things, the pebble is there. But it's not the pebble itself, but the pebble stands for those objects that we have. The body or the feelings that I'm focusing on today, they're actually always there. We're carrying them with us, and it's important to kind of come back to them, to feel into them, and to check in and see where we are. And then once we get a feeling, at some stage we might not even have to even put a label on it and say, I feel like this or I feel like that, but you can get an understanding of where you are on this kind of color scheme. Am I on the lower spectrum of the blue? Am I on the higher spectrum towards the red? Or am I moving towards the center of the green and the yellow, where we actually try to be? Because they often also call that the window of tolerance. When we are in that state, then we are not shut down, or we are not overactivated, where we can't interact with the world and the people around us and see what's going on inside. And that's basically, in the Buddhist terms, where we make sure that the defilements are not there, pulling us either way. And when those defilements kind of settle and die down, then there is clarity, then there is peace, then there is understanding. Anyway, so that's just a little bit of visualization. For some people that might be helpful. I'm quite a visual person myself, so if that works for you, please take that with you for the next couple of days.